St. Louis, Missouri, along the western banks of the Mississippi River, situated in the heartland of America. In spite of its size and sophistication, the city still retains the old-fashioned charm of its origin as a frontier town on the mighty Mississippi. Known as the Gateway to the West, the sight of the Gateway Arch can be awe-inspiring when approaching from downtown. This vibrant city has always been well acknowledged for its love of sports and the champions it has produced. The city's most recognized sports franchise is the St. Louis Cardinals of Major League Baseball. There have been so many great athletes to play team sports in St. Louis over the years. Stan Musial, Bob Gibson, and Ozzie Smith, just to name a few. In the building, directly across from Busch Stadium, the sport of bowling combines with the St. Louis Cardinals to share the space for their respective halls of fame. This is especially appropriate because there is another prolific champion from this all-American city. He was, without a doubt, the greatest ambassador the sport of bowling has ever known. Dick Weber, perhaps the greatest bowler of all time.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dick Weber, the National All-Star Champion from St. Louis. Ready?
Ladies and gentlemen, the champion for the second year in a row, here is Dick Weber of St. Louis.
The defending champion, Dick Weber, the winner again.
Many times I've observed that he can carry the count better than anyone else I've ever seen.
Once more, now the great champion, Dick Weber, beginning. Weber takes the lead. That the thin man from St. Louis has found the line. Dick is the leading money winner, incidentally.
He had it all. He was the complete athlete.
Dick is an All-American many times and a Hall of Famer, rated by many as the greatest bowler of modern times.
And many regard Dick as the greatest bowler of all time.
For Bowler of the Year, Dick Weber.
There it is. There's the Weber kick. What a beautiful finish by Dick Weber. They call him the Splinter. They call him Cracker. They call him the Thin Man. Here he comes. There it is. Going into his final game against Roy Lown. The count, 204. There it is.
I've had this ball for a year, and that's all I use. It just feels good. That's the man.
Good night.
That's the hesitation in his push away now.
Dick Weber is in there on a stop.
Times that they work together. Weber for a double. And blows him out of there. Now we have
Dick Weber, the most recognized name in the sport and undoubtedly the ambassador for bowling. At every function and event, dealing with the media or at a public appearance, Dick Weber always represented himself, his family, and his sport in a first-class, unprecedented manner.
1939, I started setting pins in Indianapolis, Indiana, on the old spikes, and rolled my first game with a cork bowling ball. My father taught me the 5-step delivery. I'll never forget it because it's still with me. I can still remember the day. My first score was 13.
My brother's first job as a very young boy was learning how to set pins at a bowling center in Indianapolis where they bowled. Then he got to practice for nothing, and it just kind of went from there. They had taken my brother to the bowling center when he was very young and taught him to bowl. They loved it. It was a recreation that they had done for years. That's where he was. If he wasn't at home, he was at the bowling center. It seems to me that's all he ever did was bowl.
My first ABC league was back in 1942, and we didn't have junior leagues back then. We had pinboy leagues, which I belonged to, and then I graduated to an adult league with my father. And it was quite exciting. You know, that was big time, even though it was a handicap league. And then, of course, from then on, I went to classic handicap leagues, as we call them then, and then classic leagues, scratch leagues. And that was most exciting to me because that was team era then. We didn't have individual bowling then, so it was really exciting to me.
I was going to graduate from high school, and my father told me I was not to go in that West Side bowling alley in Indianapolis. I went with Anna down just to see what the bowling lanes was like. I didn't tell my dad. I was just looking around, and this skinny man with a burr haircut came over and he says, "Don't I know you?" And we were married in December of that year. We were very poor. We lived in this one room, well, we called it an apartment, and the bathroom was shared with other people, like some places overseas. And we sat and played cards and ate mustard and bread. And we laughed and had such a good time, because when I met him, he was drilling bowling balls, Manhattan rubber. We got married, and he bowled a lot of pot games and made money. He was a pie man, and he worked at the city market delivering vegetables and things to restaurants, and then he'd bring home pies and things, you know, when they were left over.
Oh, I would say about 1951, 50, right through there. I heard about this kid from Indianapolis that could hook a ball. And in those days, you know, I thought I had a pretty good hook. And whenever you heard of somebody else having a big hook, it's like the last of the fast guns. You got to go watch this guy.
Our Budweiser bowling team had an exhibition over in the Indianapolis area, and our manager, Jim McGuire, made arrangements for the train to stop to pick Dick up. So we stopped over in Indianapolis and picked him up, and he first got on the train. He had this brown suit with a pink stripe in it. I think the shirt was just a little bit large around his neck, and he had a multicolored tie on, but he had a grin from ear to ear. He walked into Bowling Center, and he gave him lanes 11 and 12, and he's going to bowl one game. Well, he threw a couple of balls. He shot 279. And I think he started striking that first time, and he struck the rest of his life. Fantastic.
I was working at the post office in Indianapolis at that time, and they offered me a contract. I was making $3,700 in the post office. They offered me a contract for $3,600.
We bowled 4 years with the Budweiser team. It was Carter and Weber, Hennessy, Bluth. Pat Patterson was the team captain, and he used to introduce Dick as 118 pounds. He had to run around in the shower to get wet.
Well, I believe the first time I saw him bowl was in the National Team Tournament in Milwaukee. You know, the first year that he was on the Budweiser team, he threw a big hook, and after that, they cut his hook down because he did throw one big wide hook.
They were the greatest team, and you know, in the market at that time, and Dick was stalwart on that team. Team bowling was just it's so much different than the PBA Tour.
Quite honestly, that was the best team that ever was in the history of bowling, and we never did beat them. As an individual, yeah, we had a shot against them, but team-wise, we couldn't even come close to beating them.
At that time, we didn't have a lot of tournaments, so the only places we met was at the National All-Star, the Masters, the National Five-Man, and the National Singles. So we actually become tight as a group, bowling together, which was not cutthroat in those days. We all wanted to win.
Rose, there, Gary, off to the stop.
They were the team to beat, but we had some good battles against them. There's no doubt about it.
We had a team called the Herman Undertakers. They had 37.97, and every time we bowled on lanes 7 and 8 at Florence Lanes, we thought we had an opportunity to maybe break the record, and sure enough, that particular night, we bowled the first 2 games. Now remember, I had 267. I remember Hennessy, he said, why don't you getting gear, to do something, because he just shot 300. Well, I was fortunate to shoot 300 at the last game. But we just expected to maybe someday break the record, and we knew we had an opportunity. And, the other interesting thing is people say, well, why did you put Dick Weber in the anchor position? Well, Dick had a big hook at that particular time. We had Carter going straight leading off, and I was second. And we had Pat Patterson, we had Bill Lillard, Tom Hennessy, but we always put Dick last because he had the big hook. We didn't want to follow him.
And we were like family. It was just a lot of fun to bowl with those guys. I can remember a couple guys I didn't really like, but they probably didn't like me either. But for the most part, the guys, you bowled hard and tried to beat them, and then you enjoyed the company afterward.
We used to cook steaks after the tour on Saturday afternoon, and when the TV show was over with, a bunch of guys would get together, go to the pool, and Dick would give me a couple $100, say, go buy some steaks, and we'd cook steaks, and we'd get the permission from the manager at the hotel and so forth. They would give us plates and forks and knives, and it became a habit. Every tournament, we'd have this little party afterwards, so-called victory party, and Dick Weber and Don Carter and all the greats, Earl Anthony, and all the guys in those days were the older tour players.
I think when they went to Korea, Dick averaged more than anybody on the team, and it was they bowled for the military, and everybody struggled, but Dick, he found a way. He came back and he couldn't break an egg, and they gave him heck. But he managed to do all right from that point on.
He and his young wife built a home in Florissant, Missouri, a home in which they lived in for over 50 years. It was a lovely ranch-style home with an attached garage, a front porch, and a full basement. But in the early days, times were tough.
I had wanted Dick to quit bowling because these friends that you read about, they when he couldn't afford to bowl, they would pay his way because they wanted him on their team. So there I'd be sitting in Indianapolis by myself. When he told his team that he was going to quit because he was gone too much. And I remember Jack Curran, who was an insurance man, came to the house, and Paula crawled up on his lap, and he said, Dick, I want you to know we want you on the team, and we'll pay your expenses if you'll just bowl with us. And Dick told him no, and then when I heard all that, I thought, well, how selfish can you be? He feeds us, he makes a living, that's what he loves. I finally came to the realization that it was better to have a man home happy once in a while than someone home all the time that would rather be someplace else.
He was gone a lot. I told you before that, I had a father-son outing at school, and I had to go across the street and get the next-door neighbor, Herman Brown, to be my father.
Rent-a-dad?
Rent-a-dad, yeah. He went to that with me, but, we got to see Dad on TV a lot. And he was ours when he came home, though.
Dad was gone a lot, but Mom kept us busy, too. I mean, all the boys were in Corey League and everything. And I went to dancing school, and I was dancing 3 days out of the week. By the time Dad got home, we had his undivided attention.
Before there was a U.S. Open, the major event and most revered bowling tournament title was simply called the All-Star. At the national level, the All-Star tournament was a long, grueling format. It was demanding, physically and mentally.
We bowled 100 games in 9 days, and you had to be in shape to do that.
There's a lot of things that people didn't realize about the All-Star tournament. It was built on a platform, and you had to walk up 2 steps to get to the lanes. So just think of walking up 109 games we bowled in a 9-day period, walking up 2 stairs and then throwing the ball, and if you didn't make a strike, you had to shoot 2 shots, walk down 2 stairs, sit down, and then when it's your turn, walk up 2 stairs again. So how many times you go to the doctor's office, they let you walk up a couple stairs and you're out of breath? Well, do that for 109 games and come and tell me how good you are.
The worst part of it, you bowled 4 games and then you were out for 4, about an hour and 20 minutes. You'd come back, the women bowled in between. They only had 16 lanes. And the breaks hurt more than the actual bowling because it lasted all day. You started 9 a.m., you wound up at 10 that night.
Dick had that desire, determination, and you could see it in his eyes. He had the killer instinct, but he was such a nice guy off the lanes. And somebody's probably said this, I don't know, but nobody's ever been mad at Dick Weber, ever, and he's the only guy. It's kind of funny, they were all mad at me because I was a lane man. I never met a man that didn't like Dick Weber.
Those players, were the top players in their time. Dick Weber, was playing so many tournaments before they even had the PBA. The PBA wasn't even formed until I think he was 31. So it's not like in the 70s where there was only 3 channels to watch, and ABC TV, on Saturday afternoon with the professional bowling was such a big thing. I mean, they got a third of the audience, and we're, drawing ratings of 10. Now the ratings are about a 1, which means only 1% of the population is watching it. So it's not quite as big. It's hard to compare generations about who did what and when and where. And I mean, Dick Weber is somebody everybody knows about in bowling.
Had no hips, and it made his swing so good. That was one of the assets that he had in bowling. Plus the guts that he had. He knew he was a winner, and he got out and won.
He had a physique. What was it? His advantage is he didn't carry a lot of body weight, but proportionately, people don't think about this, but to be a great bowler, your shoulders have to be slightly larger than your hips. If your hips are large, you have to go around. Dick Weber had the straightest, prettiest swing coming back and coming forward. His swing was always on a perfect line. If he was looking at a target, he had great hand-eye coordination. His arm swing was always on that target. It didn't vary where he had to make adjustments like a lot of us. We had a little loop in our swing, or maybe we elbowed the ball. Dick's arm swing was just perfect.
Well, Fred, I made a little change on lane 24. I've straightened myself up. So when I approach the foul line, I'll be more direct with my shoulders. Will be more parallel with the foul line, and I can reach out in front of me.
He could carry quite a bit. I think the main thing was the 5-7 off the wall. He just hit light in the pocket, but it seemed like there's something that come off the wall, carry the 2 more other pins to a strike. And some of the big power ball bowlers, they would just go crazy. Lucky. Well, it wasn't luck. There was a lot of finesse to it, and he had a purpose for about everything he did.
I remember, watching him bowl and walking through the concourse, and occasionally you'd hear other bowlers, and they'd be watching Dick because they're trying to compete against him, trying to keep up with him, and he'd carry a wall shot or he'd carry some kind of off hit, and they'd say, "That lucky son of a gun! I mean, how does he do it?" And it occurred to me, it said, well, a person in bowling can be lucky for a game, obviously, or a day, but nobody's lucky for half a century. There has to be more reason to why pins fell down for him. His ball was a lot stronger, although it did turn out to be straight or straighter than people ever really knew. The combination, he usually had good speed, although he had great speed control. If you wanted to slow it down, he could do that. But the axis tilt that he had on the ball, and maybe because he grew up originally being able to hook it, he had the right kind of hand, so that he created a lot of mixing with the pins. He didn't leave as many 10 pins as some of the other guys, and as well as getting the off hits.
And they all add up to a perfect pocket hit, seen here in slow motion.
I mean, and that's how you end up winning the number of titles that he did.
I think what he possessed is something that I try to teach right up from the beginning, and that's a free arm swing, a real relaxed free arm swing. And Dick had that. His whole body was relaxed.
He had such a natural swing. He had natural timing. He had that burning desire that no other bowler had. He would never give up, and he was just always attacking. And even when he was in trouble, you could just see that emotion, and he would always come back. He was the man. He was the best.
We joked around and kidded with each other in the paddock in our dressing room before we bowled, and those were very tense moments because guys were bowling for a living, and you go out and, if you didn't bowl well, obviously didn't make any money that week. So, but Dick and I, we we kind of mocked each other and made fun of each other and made jokes. And he's a great winner, but he was in our episodes. He could dish it out, but he took it back. I mean, he was on the receiving end a lot of times, and he accepted it just like he could dish it out.
Team competition ruled the sport of bowling in the 1950s. A man named Eddie Elias came along and decided to get the top individual bowlers in the country together and form the Professional Bowlers Association.
There were 7 of us in a room that met with Eddie Elias in New Jersey. That was the first meeting we had. Then later, the second meeting was with the 33 people. So we had about 7 bowlers in there, and that's the beginning of the conversation for the start of the PBA.
When the PBA tour came in, the national beard teams, the Falstaffs with Harry Smith's team and Dick's team had a choice to either stay with team bowling or to join the PBA.
Well, he paved the path for every PBA player to have a chance to come out and earn a living by throwing a bowling ball.
First time I met Dick Weber was at Brentwood Bowl in South San Francisco, California. They had a PBA tournament there in 1961, and I was 20 years old, and it was where I bowled league, and I kept thinking the pros are coming to town. Well, I'm going to kick some butt, because I mean, there's just no way anybody's going to come to town and beat me in my bowling center. That's just the mindset of a young person. And Weber came in, and all the names came in, and we're down there, and I averaged 225, got to 10th. I thought, holy, these guys are good. I mean, they were really just phenomenal. I couldn't believe how good they were. I couldn't believe how much I didn't know and needed to know, and the difference.
Back in 1960, there was a tournament out in Long Island called the Newsday Open, which Dick won, by the way, and went to the bar. I finished second, by the way, and we went to the bar, had a couple of beers, and we talked, and we became very good friends.
In 1961, they came out with the national doubles. It was Ray Bluth, Dick Weber, Harry Smith, Billy Willow, and Carmen Salvino, Buddy Bomar, and they headed out on the West Coast, and that was quite a thrill. Just an honor, just to bowl with them.
I remember waiting all summer. Dick never bowled a summer tour, and he was going to bowl in Fort Smith. And I couldn't wait to just go to the bowl and watch him.
When I was 18 years old, I bowled my very first PBA event in 1965. It was in Detroit at the Nationals. And they had the general membership meeting there that year. And Eddie Elias, who was then the commissioner of the PBA, he got up there and started to speak and was explaining how sick Steve Nagy was, and one of our early great pros, and had tremendous amount of hospital bills, which he couldn't pay. And Eddie put a box up there and wanted to try and raise some money, and the first one that went up there was Weber. And Weber put $500 in the box in 1965. And, right from the beginning, you realize that Dick is different than other people.
The greatest match I've ever seen was Carter and Weber in front of 3,000 people bowling a 4-game qualifying. It was 980-something to 970-something. And every time I asked Carter who won, he says, I can't remember. So apparently Weber won the match.
All right. Awfully hard to get rid of him. 133 for Don Carter through the 7th and a strike. You have an added sidelight here in the light of the fact that Dick Weber's teammate, Tommy Hennessy, is attempting to knock off Eddie Lubanski to keep Dick in second. They are shooting 3rd and 4th.
The goosebumps and the awe and the stuff was just phenomenal. I mean, Weber both of them, all of them. That era, during the team bowling and the PBA first started, the 60s, the greatest decade of bowling ever.
In 1969, I turned pro, and one of my goals was to bowl the legend, the PBA's most prolific champion, Dick Weber. And on an August night in 1969, in the New England Open, I stood at the foul line because it was the first game of the second block of match play. And in the old days, you got introduced at the start of a block. And next to me at the foul line was Dick Weber. So the first time I bowled him, I was announced with him.
Dick, he was the greatest. I mean, he was the greatest then and the greatest at the end. And it was just wonderful to work with him. He was a wonderful, wonderful person.
He was just a great ambassador for bowling. I mean, and he never hardly turned anybody down for anything.
Nothing.
If somebody asked him to do something, if he could, he would do it.
We grew older and the PBA matured. We got involved in the administration end of the bowling game, and I really enjoyed the meetings that we had to determine policy, to find guys, to make our rules, do whatever we had to do. And Dick was a great part of that. And it just amazed me that he could do all of these things, still compete, still be involved at home, and he was just an ambassador for bowling throughout the world.
He spent time in Vietnam and Germany at the bases, and the soldiers that were there in the hospitals and places, they knew who he was, because the armed forces sends those telecasts over.
Dick Weber, American bowling champion and current visitor to Saigon, reports a sense of determination among wounded Americans he spoke with at troop hospitals. Bringing a touch of home, Weber and other celebrities boost morale by sharing experiences and offering their know-how. The Weber touch is at its peak on the lanes, and he shows the stuff of champions with a series of perfect strikes.
Dick would come home and call their parents and tell them what their son had said, you know, to call him and tell him he's all right and he'll see him sooner. And so Dick had a lot of people that loved him.
He had fantastic fan support. I was fortunate myself. I had good fan support, but nothing like what Dick had. And he always had time for the fans, always had time to sign autographs. I never ever saw him turn one down, no matter what. If he just got 130, he wouldn't turn down a fan. He was just, like I said, just a wonderful human being.
I idolized him and marveled at his popularity with the people across the United States. He was loved. The crowd would roar.
I don't think anybody was ever had the fans on their side when they bowled Dick Weber. It was always Dick. And you know, probably to most of his opponents were on Dick's side too, so, you know.
At the end of the 15 rounds, Wayloo had a lead of less than a point. There's the strike. But Weber now must do nothing more than pay attention in the remaining 2 frames. Dick, of course, part of Don Carter's team, the only team to ever qualify in its entirety for the finals. The 7th pin is out of there, and that's it. 10,765 games have been bowled in this, the 22nd annual All-Star Bowling Tournament.
Well, Dick's great bowler, great champion, and I'm happy that he won. If I couldn't win, he's a great fellow.
Thank you very much, Billy.
Dick Weber was a showman and never minded being in the spotlight. He loved his family, his wife, his kids, and needless to say, his grandkids.
He was a true family man in every aspect of it.
His family is bowling too. His boys are deeply rooted in bowling, as you know. Pete and Rich and Johnny, they're in bowling yet, and his wife Juanita, his daughter, I mean, they're all in bowling.
Great Britain, they have the king and queen, which is considered the royal family, and I personally feel that the bowling industry with the Weber family has a royal family.
I got on the tour before I turned 18, and at that time you were supposed to be 18 to go out. My first tournament in Milwaukee, I made my debut, and I started out 230 something, and then I fell flat on my face because I started really squeezing the ball. I was getting nervous, and I heard some people behind me say, "Oh, he'll never be as good as his dad," you know. And, you know, I had to put up with that for a long time, but you know, I got over it. Kansas City's where Dad and I bowled. That was the first time father-son bowled each other in the finals.
In Kansas City?
In Kansas City,
And then John,
yeah.
you bowled him there too?
Yeah.
Bowling there
too, yeah.
And Pete, how many times did you bowl your dad in match play?
I've bowled my dad about 30 times in match play.
Have you really?
Yes.
Did you beat him?
I'm 28-2.
Yeah.
Really? 28 wins, 2 losses. One of those losses, I'll even admit, I left an 8-10 in the second shot.
0-10 maybe, or 0-20, whatever. Whenever we met, I never could beat that guy. If he needed to strike out to beat me by a pin, I could just pack my bags and go.
And now, Channel 5 Eyewitness News today in St. Louis.
To bowling enthusiasts, Dick Weber is a household name. The St. Louisan has been on the Professional Bowlers Tour since 1948, has been inducted into the Bowling Hall of Fame, and competes against his son Pete. Dick Weber started all of his kids bowling at the age of 1 and says the whole family, 4 kids and 5 grandchildren, bowl together for fun. Dick, we're glad to have you here. What does it feel like to compete against your son?
Well, Jennifer, it's a thrill and an honor to be able to compete against your son. It's just one of those things that you look forward to because you always want one of your sons to follow in your footsteps.
How do you compare Pete at this stage of the game now with where you were then?
Well, Tom, I consider him much better than I, because he's the youngest player ever to win 10 professional bowling titles. And when I started at the age of 25, I didn't have any professional bowling titles. All my kids have had 300 games. My wife bowls in self-defense. And the grandchildren all bowl. And, of course, the youngest is Ashley Marie, and she's Pete's daughter. And she carries an average anywhere from 0 to 49. So we have fun.
Weber, the most recognized name in the sport of bowling. When you hear that name, you immediately think of a bowler, a competitor, an athlete, a star, and a champion. Pete Weber, Dick Weber, like father, like son.
I think that all bowlers, especially in that era, I think everybody had a fire. Now, some people didn't carry it off. When they got beat, they didn't carry it quite so good. Dick could get beat, not that he got beat too often. But when he got beat, he didn't hang his head. He didn't walk off the lanes mad. He did not dislike you, and he carried through. I think that was one of his greatest attributes, was that he carried himself well.
He's very competitive, and he got emotional. I mean, but not near to the point that Pete does.
Petey walking down the steps of his father, trying to a very tiger out there in the lanes, and a very competitive guy.
You know, they've always made mention of what a good loser Pete is when somebody beats him, whoever it may be, and he got that from Dick.
I got my fire from Dad. I think I got my sportsmanship from Dad too, because people think I'm the bad guy yeah, maybe I am, but when it comes to losing, I think I'm just as big as a winner as I am loser. People said I am not Dick Weber. Well, I'm not. But you know what? I acted just like him. He was a ham in front of the cameras. Getting to bowl with Dad on tour was pretty neat. That's kind of cool. And to see the responses he's got when I've been with him around the world, that's an honor for me.
I think I've got more 300 games than Rich and Paula
put together.
Yeah.
She's got 1, I got 3, so
I'm not going to go there.
Hard to beat.
I'm not going to go there. I didn't mention you. I see a lot of my dad and Pete, and I don't know what traits I got up from him, but he really did teach me how to interact with people and how to have fun with people, and
you get your stubbornness from Dad. I know that.
We're all stubborn.
The guy was just a natural born ham. He liked people, and frankly, when he had a chance to reach out through the media, he took advantage of it, and I think he enjoyed the give and take.
To me, Dick Weber was the greatest ambassador the sport of bowling ever had. He was always great with the fans. He was always a humble person.
He was a showman. He bowled on Dave Letterman's show a number of times. Out in the street, he knocked down the champagne glasses. He bowled at Pumpkins, if I remember right, once, and then threw the ball through a TV.
It was funny to watch him bowl. I mean, he had a ball with it, and Dad was, like Paula said before, I mean, he's a ham, whenever he gets in front of people or the TV, I mean, he hams it up, and he loved it. He couldn't wait to get back.
Absolutely. I know he had a big crowd out there. I mean, see his pant leg whipping on the TV. Yeah. He's got his coat on, and there's like
he had to be a
couple hundred people down there watching.
The one was where he bowled on the Flying Fortress at 40,000 feet. He bowled the highest game ever. His highest game ever, I think it was 126, but it was 40,000 feet, so it was the highest.
He was was up in an airplane bowling Sylvia Ween, and I did, he did tell me that there was a lot of turbulence whenever he got up to bowl, and when Sylvia Ween was up to bowl, it was smooth sailing. But or they might have to bank to the right or the left when Dad threw the ball. But that's about all I remember of that. That was a long time ago.
Not only was Dick Weber a charter member of the PBA in the 1950s, but 3 decades later, in the 1980s, he was the driving force behind the formation of a senior tour for PBA bowlers over the age of 50.
He was the one that started the original PBA and then the senior PBA. He was the one that got everybody together. I believe Allison and Dick Weber. Let's have a couple of senior tournaments.
Dick Weber is in there on a solid strike.
We had used to have a senior touring players doubles tournament, and in 1986 I got paired with Dick. I mean, he was obviously very competitive with the senior tour, bowling very well in the seniors, and he kept apologizing during the tournament that he wasn't bowling well enough. Well, in relationship to the seniors, he was like leading the pack, I think, and I was about 10th or 12th with the regular touring players. So, I mean, I'm the one that should have been apologizing to him.
ESPN and the Professional Bowlers Association present the championship round finals of the PBA Touring Pro Senior Doubles Championship. Never before in the history of the Professional Bowlers Association has a player won a national PBA title in 5 consecutive decades. But tonight, the great Dick Weber, with a victory in the championship match, would set a brand new PBA standard.
As a competitor, we didn't bowl each other for the title until we were in the seniors. It was amazing. I mean, I bowled them in qualifying, but we never bowled on TV for the title until we bowled in Las Vegas.
PBA Touring Pro Seniors Championship here in O'Fallon. Weber got it off his hand.
Good night. Spare, and they're awful good shape.
He got a handful. Hey, look at Weber.
Dick, I'd like to be the first to congratulate you on being the first man to win 5 titles in 5 different decades. Thanks. Congratulations. I'm glad you did it here.
Something old and something new. Richard, you win in 5 decades and you bowled just beautifully tonight.
Well, it was a pleasure and an honor to bowl with this young man, Dennis. And the main thing about this, not only me winning in 5 decades, but also he's made his first telecast tournament champions Firestone. So it's a great thrill and a great honor to bowl with a young man like that.
Juanita, come on over here. The first lady of bowling here in St. Louis, Juanita Weber, and you've been watching him win for a long, long time. This has to be a big moment for you.
It is, but it gets harder all the time, and I'm really proud of Justin. We all thank him.
Dick developed friendships with all bowlers, not only throughout the United States, but literally around the world.
In 1979, I was representing Japan in the Brunswick World Tournament of Champions in Chicago. At that tournament, I had bowled a perfect 300 game. Unfortunately, due to loss of paperwork or some miscommunication, I had a temporary PBA license at the time, and therefore the PBA couldn't recognize my perfect game. Mr. Weber wanted to make clear that I was representing Japan and that I was a JPBA member and had every right to bowl in the tournament. He did everything he could to try and get me the ring. However, due to some paperwork and red tape, I couldn't get the ring from the PBA. So instead, Mr. Weber gave me his own ring at that tournament.
The longevity of the man, I mean, he bowled till he was 75, and he was just great. I mean, I watched him all the time, and just great.
I always like to tell the story. We bowled in San Diego, and Dick and I were in our 20s at that time. We bowled 2 guys named Buzz Fazio and Steve Nagy, 2 of the greats. And we got back to the room, and we were exhausted. And I said, we were starting to talk about how could Steve and Buzz still bowl like they are at 40s, 45, whatever they were at that time. And here Dick was doing the same thing when he's in his 70s. So he just was a very unusual person.
I think as he got older, 75, it was unbelievable. He could win at 75. He won a regional tournament at 75 years old, which is just unreal, unheard of, really.
Dick was a consistent competitor in professional events, but also bowled in many other tournaments. He bowled in 57 USBC championships, formerly known as the ABC. These tournaments were annual, long-running events that had as many as 90,000 entries. They moved to different cities each year. Dick won 4 ABC championships. In 1999, in Syracuse, New York, he broke the 100,000 pin barrier at that event. It took over 50 years to get to this point. This is the shot that vaulted Dick Weber over the 100,000 pin lifetime barrier at the USBC National Championship, formerly known as the ABC Tournament.
Only 4 other bowlers in the 96-year history of this tournament have knocked down 100,000 pins. He joins Joe Norris of San Diego, the late Frank Carr and Bill Dorman of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Greg Griffel of Syracuse. Thank you very much, Al. Thank you very much. You have to have the good Lord with you, and fans like yourself behind me. It's given me the thrills all these 52 years. This is my 3rd time I've been in Syracuse, and I want to thank my fellow members on this squad for holding up for this honor. And all I can say is thank you very much. It's quite a thrill and an honor. Greg Griffel, it's great to be with you. Greg Griffel, stand up, please. There he is.
First of all, the competitor that he was on the lanes. I mean, there's no question that Dick Weber wanted to win. He wanted to win each and every event that he bowled in. But when he was done, that last ball that was thrown down the lane or rolled down the lane, you know, so be it. When he was done, he had all the time in the world for every Tom, Dick, and Harry. You could never watch Dick walk through a crowd and not give someone 2 seconds of time to try to help them out or sign an autograph for them.
If I had a good tournament and I had a bad tournament, he was the first one there talking to me. And he always had a positive note. He always told me, he said, Gene, you're a bowler just like I am. I always will bowl, and you will always bowl. And he said, that's what we do. We are bowlers. Good or bad, he said, we're bowlers.
He would never go out and bowl unless he thought he could compete, and that's why he bowled up to 70-some years old, because he believed he could win every time he went to the lanes.
Regardless of the situation, he expected to win no matter what. And that's something I never thought about, but that's what makes the champions the real true champions they are, because they never expect to lose. And most of us expect to win by accident once in a while, but these guys expect to win, and that's what Dick Weber was. He was an all-time champion.
Well, what I want to know is you won in 1963. That was 23 years ago. This is 1986. Are you going to win 23 years from now?
How old does that make me, Mike? I don't know. I'm going to try like Mad Mike. I enjoy the game so much. I'm practically retired from the national tour, but I'm going to be around to harass some of these fellas anyway.
Well, I'm looking forward to bowling you when I get in the seniors.
We're going to raise the age limit when you become eligible.
Greatness comes from longevity, and longevity is how did you do over a long period of time. Well, in bowling, it's unlike most every other sport because it's a game that's on the surface. Golf, it's in the air. Baseball, it's in the air. Football, it's in the air, basically. Bowling is on a surface. Well, the environment has changed dramatically over the years. When Dick was in his original heyday, and I say original because he had more than one heyday, he bowled with a hard rubber bowling ball on a lacquer surface. As time went by, the balls got softer and softer, but the surfaces got harder and harder. And now a lot of careers ended when those changes would happen. But Dick would find a way.
In the 50s, it was Carter and Weber, back and forth. Carter had the edge. In the 60s, it was me and Weber had the edge. And then in the 70s, it was Weber, Roth, and it's always been Weber and somebody. You know, I don't care what, he's just always there. He's always a threat. When Dick Weber showed up, I don't care what age he was a threat to take a spot out of the finals.
Dick is what everybody would like to think that the game of bowling is about.
He's done everything that nobody else has ever done, and you know, I probably won't ever get a chance to do that, but it was fun just watching him do it.
Yeah. And let's face it, he knew everything about bowling, and he carried it off, and he was great for bowling, absolutely great.
Dick is just one of a kind. He was just, you know, my wife knows nothing about bowling, but she loved Dick and Dick loved her, and she, you know, she just was awed by his personality and his warmth.
It was special being out there to bowl with him, and my tour life was one of the most special places that I had to go bowl every year was Dick Weber Lanes in Florissant, Missouri. I just loved to go there, and for some reason, no matter how bad I was bowling, I always bowled well enough there to make the cut.
One thing that impressed me during my time is he met my daughter one time, and 5 years later, he bowled another Pro-Am, and he came up to my daughter and says, "How are you doing, Nicole?" And he just had a way of remembering names, and that's the only time he'd ever met her is at one time, and 5 years later, still remembered her name.
He's the greatest ambassador. He'll always be, and he'll never be forgotten in the game of bowling.
Well, to the game of the bowling, he was just the best. There was really nothing that he couldn't do. He could play from the first board to the 25th board. I mean, there was just nothing that he couldn't do. I think he won with 5 steps, 4 steps, 6 steps, you know, as far as his approach goes. He could just do it all, really.
To a lot of people, he was bowling. And with apologies to Don Carter, who was known as Mr. Bowling, Dick Weber owned his own special niche of the sport.
He's just such a great, funny man. He had the greatest sense of humor and a hearty laugh, and he was just a fun person to be around.
To me, he was like the Arnold Palmer of bowling. Nobody had a bad word to say about Dick Weber. And that he transcended time, and it's a loss for all of us individually and personally that he's gone, and a loss for the sport of bowling.
It's a pleasure and an honor to be able to bowl with these fellows out here, because I started in some of them with the 40s like Carmen, and some of the other fellows in the 50s and 60s, and it's just a pleasure and an honor for me to be able to participate with them, and they're all a bunch of great guys, and they're all champions as far as I'm concerned.
2 weeks before he passed away, we spoke. He was getting ready to write a letter to the state of Nevada because the state of Nevada would not release Harry Golden's Hall of Fame ring and medallion to the National Bowling Museum. We talked about that quite a bit. We talked about our families. And then I said to him that I want you to know how much I love you. And I heard him blush. And he said, "Larry, you don't have to say that." I said, "Oh, no, Dick." I said, "I want you to know how much I love you. You meant so much to me as a young man, and I don't see you anymore. And I don't know when I'm going to bowl again, if I ever will bowl. But what you did for me as a young man and what you did for our sport is something so special. And we're so lucky to have you." And he thanked me a number of times. And we said our goodbyes. And 2 weeks later, I got the call from Dave Sutar that Dick had passed away. It was a very tough day for me. And I cried a lot. And I thank God that I had a chance to talk with him one more time in our lives.
Dick Weber had his feet on the ground to the day he died. And God bless you, buddy. The only thing I really regret in my life, I never got to bowl doubles with him. I wanted to go to the ABC tournament one year, but he bowled with Joe Norris that year. I wanted to go to the ABC and just me and Dick bowled together one time in my lifetime, and I never got that opportunity. I always regret that my friend left me before I could do that.
I'd had a little sinus thing like I'm right now. It's just that time of year where you go through this kind of stuff. And he was telling me how he just had his physical, he's doing great. And anyway, we met that night at 8 o'clock, Weber, myself, and Bill Lillard, his former teammate. And we were just hanging around and playing a couple of dollar blackjack for, about half hour. And I just, Dick, I'm not feeling that good. But we arranged to meet the next night for the grand opening ceremony. And the next day I was on the Hall of Fame committee for the USBC. And I just kept coughing, and I said, I just don't want to be bothering anybody. So I canceled out of my meeting with Dick for that night. I was supposed to be there for the thing. And to show you the kind of person he was, that when I found out the next day that he had died, I cried for a solid month. I absolutely fell apart. I couldn't, I just couldn't face it. I said, because that was my hero. That's my idol. That's the man that nobody will ever reach that level with me like Dick Weber did. So I finally called Juanita. I finally got where I could carry on a conversation without crying, and I called Juanita. And she said, Billy, he was more worried. He called her worried about me. He said, Billy didn't make it. We couldn't get together. We did do this, and I hope he's going to be okay. I mean, that's just, and that made me cry again.
We were very good friends, and he was the class of the game. And I miss him, and I'll see him when I'm up there.
This tribute to Dick is going to enable so many of the great bowlers, both now and in the earlier years, to be able to get together and reminisce and have a good time.
When Dick passed away, they had a private ceremony, and none of us got to come here and say goodbye to Dick. We all had to say goodbye and at home and by talking to Juanita and everything, but that's what he wanted. He didn't want a fanfare, and he probably really wouldn't want this, but we're here to celebrate Dick Weber's life, not his passing. Everybody misses him, but it was very hard for us when that happened, and it was a sad thing, but he'll live on forever. He really will.
He is with us all the time. It never fails. He was one of a kind.
There was a wonderful gathering at the downstairs theater at the Bowling Hall of Fame. Friends, family, and bowlers that had traveled at their own expense from all over the country to meet in St. Louis and pay tribute to their friend. The audience was all seated when a special guest entered the room, Dick's wife, Juanita. Then the crowd sat back and was treated to some special footage of Dick bowling. A general feeling of electricity and anticipation was prevalent as they had gathered together to watch some footage of Dick Weber bowl just one more time.
Regardless of how many titles you have a really superstar studded field of players that are here.
I am proud of every person that came here. Why are we here? Because every one of us loved Dick Weber. You couldn't get people to do what we're doing today to come here. Everybody's life is different right now, and yet everybody's life today is the same because of Dick Weber. He brought us all back together. I doubt very much if anybody else could have done that.
If you knew him, you do it. You wouldn't even think twice. It's the same as family.
Hall of Famer Bob Hart sums it up the best. There might be bowlers with more titles and more money, but if you go by hearts won and friendships made, Dick Weber is the all-time best.
I've helped the Professional Bowlers Association grow, watch the bowling industry grow, and make it better for the younger players that are coming up. I was a pioneer for the Professional Bowlers Association in 1958. Now I'm a pioneer for the Senior Tour in 1989, more or less, and those things are gratifying to me.
Dick was always comfortable in front of the crowd. He could captivate the attention of any audience in any setting. Over the years, he never seemed to age. Dick Weber lived his 75 years to the fullest and established a real legacy. His memory will carry on with his family, thousands of friends, and admirers. He was, without a doubt, the greatest ambassador the sport of bowling has ever known.
Thank you. Dick had a full life, and he really loved every bit of it.
After 2 days of taping interviews and reminiscing, everyone got together for a tribute dinner at Mike Shannon's restaurant in downtown St. Louis. It was a wonderful time for many of the Hall of Famers to sit down with old friends and fellow bowlers that they hadn't seen in years. There was no prearranged program after dinner. Each person that wanted to come to the podium and share a memory or old story was invited to do so. It was an evening enjoyed by all.
So we're bowling the Southern Match Game Championship, and Dick Weber had just joined the Budweiser. So in St. Louis, they got all those slots. That's how they got their scores. So Dick Weber had to cut his hook down. He had to start going straighter, so he started to flatten out his ball a little bit. So the first frame, he gets a strike. Next ball, solid 5. Gets another strike, solid 5 on the right lane. So I took my ball and I put it in my lap. And he's looking at me, he says, "Why do you have your ball in your lap?" I said, "Man, your ball's got a disease." I says, "It's got 5-pinitis. And it looks a little contagious, so I don't want your ball touching my ball. It might get the same damn 5 pins. I'm used to swishing the 5. So I finally beat him a game. I got to bowl him in Venezuela. So the night before, those white drinks, the pina coladas, he's popping them in them, see? So he says, "Hey, have a couple more, my man." I said, "Those things taste good, don't they?" Popped a couple more in. So we got a bowl the next day, and I got a bowl in the 3rd game. So I said, "Man, I'm finally going to get a shot at him. He's just whipped me 10 in a row. I'm finally going to get him." So we go to bowl, and he's leaning like this here. Looked like the Leaning Tower of Pizza. He's leaning like this here. I said, "I got him now." So I shoot about 240 some game. Damned if he don't shoot 257 to beat me. So I go up to him, I said, "Dick, no, we're buddies. What the hell are you standing sideways? How the hell did you bowl that good?" He says, "Carmen," this is the sense of humor he had that a lot of people didn't know. He says, "Man, before last night, I was looking, I saw 10 pins up there." He said, "Today I saw 20. He says, "I knew damn well I could knock 10 of them down."
When Norm Myers and Sharon were married, Dick invited me down to his basement and said he had something in the freezer of his refrigerator for me. It was a whole pitcher of martinis. I managed to finish him before the night was over. Another time, Dick invited Jerry Hale and I to St. Louis, and then to go to a tournament, a regional tournament in Kansas. But before we went, we were going to play Bogey Hills. Well, Dick picked us up at the airport and took us to a motel. This is early evening, and picked us up the next morning, and we went to Bogey Hills. And I rode with Dick in the cart, the whole 18 holes. And afterwards, we're in the bar having a beer, and Dick says to me, he says, "Glenn," he says, "you took me to places on this course I've never seen before."
There's nothing I can say to you that you already don't know, that you guys are the best friends that my father ever had. If it wasn't for you guys, the PBA would never even have been formed. Thank you very much for being part of my dad's life. Thank you for letting me be part of your lives. Because if it wasn't for Dick Weber, none of us would be sitting here right now. And please, thank you from me and the Weber family that if it wasn't for you, that bowling would never exist. And if it wasn't for Dick Weber, definitely bowling would never exist. So thank you very much for being here and contributing to my dad's life. Thank you for being part of it. On behalf of all the Webers here, thank you very much. We love you very much, and God bless you all.
I'm used to sitting and watching Dick talk to everyone, so it isn't easy for me. But our family thanks all of you for coming here today for this Dick Weber documentary. When Bill McCorkle dreamed up this project, I'm sure he had no idea how much time and work it entailed. He assured me that it was a labor of love for him. Thank you, Bill. Jerry and Jim have helped our family through that last terrible year. And I want to thank both of them. And Dick would have loved all of this excitement and this gathering and these stories, and he would have had some too. And he would have loved seeing all his dear friends. And maybe I don't need to tell you, but he truly loved each and every one of you. And I thank you for coming.